Hey there everyone, it's Nina. Thanks for joining me today for a new video. Today we're going to talk about using stamps and stencils together to color in your stamped images. But we're going to step it up a little bit and add some beauty and a little pizzazz to your stenciling that will make your stamped images stand out even more. In today's project, I'm using the Dancing Sunflowers stamp, stencil, and die set from Altenew. These are really large, beautiful florals that would fill an A2 card perfectly, but we're actually going to make a slimline card today because I wanted to use both of these sunflowers on my card. So I'm going to stamp these onto some Simon Says Stamp 120-pound white cardstock with Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. I'm stamping the images a couple times because these are quite large and I want to make sure that I've gotten each area of the details of these images. So by stamping a couple of times inside of the MISTI, you make sure that you get a really nice impression. Okay, let's talk about the stencils. If you notice on the packaging of the stamps, there are letters that correspond with the stencils so that you can easily figure out what part of the stencil colors each section of the stamped image. So if you look closely at the stencils, I'm going to try to catch the light here with my camera. You'll notice there are little characters marking each of these sections of the stencils. So there are a total of 6 stencils in this set and 3 are devoted to each flower. So you're going to have 3 stencils for each flower that you're coloring. Once you start lining up the images with the corresponding stencils, you'll really see how this comes together. And the fun part is that each of these stencils mask off another area of that stamped image, so you can really get some detailed and precise coloring in different areas. I'm going to use Simon Says Stamp Pawsitively saturated inks to color in all of my images here. And I'm going to do some shading with these inks. I thought it'd be fun to accentuate the shading of these stencils by adding some shading on each layer. So for this layer of the petals, I colored in with 2 different colors of yellow ink. Now there is a separate shading layer that I will use to add some additional shading, but I think it's fun to be able to mix and match your inks to create some really unique effects. So here I'm using a mix of detail and small blending brushes just to get a good coverage and also keep a precise application of certain colors in different areas. Those detail blending brushes are invaluable for that. Okay, so this is where I'm switching over to the shading layer for the sunflowers. And I actually pulled out an orange color to do the shading for this because this is going to look really good against the yellows and it's going to give me that deep shading that I want. Each flower has 2 shading layers, just as they had 2 petal coloring areas. And this process is repeated on the other flower. I'm only going to show you the coloring for one of these sunflowers because I did the exact same process with the other. I just used the other set of stencils for it. And like I said, you get all 6 stencils in the pack of stencils that coordinate with this stamp set. Now I'm moving on to the leaves. And again, I'm going to do some shading before I actually add the shading layer that corresponds with this leaf. So I'm going to start first with the lightest color of TIDEPOOL, and then I brought in AEGEAN, and I'm going to use that to just shade around the base of the flower. That's going to give a little bit of a shadow effect. Then there is the shading layer for that leaf layer, so I'm just going to lay that on top, and you'll want to use the darkest layer to color that in. I actually had a craft fail here. I reached for the wrong ink pad, and I'm actually shading this with the lightest color, and I didn't even notice it until I peeled it off later and I was like, oh, wait a minute, the shading's not dark enough. So I actually had to go back and fix that later on. You'll see later, right now it looks pretty light. I'll fix that off camera to shade that with the darkest color, which is what I should have used in the first place. So here I am making a mistake. So it's proof that we all do it. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the center of the flower, and I'm going to use some MELON and also SHERBET to color that in. There are 2 shading layers for the center as well. And as I'm working, I'm using our Simon Says Stamp very low tack tape to hold this stencil in place. It works really well. Okay, so now it's time to shake things up and add a little pizzazz. I'm going to bring in one of those shading layers again, picked which one I liked most, with a clear glitter paste. You can use whichever you want. I'm happening to be using one from Brutus Monroe called Falling Snow. It's one of my favorites, and I do have it linked below in the video description with all the other products that I'm using. But that's what I use to apply through the stencil. So here it is. You can see it looks a little milky right now, but when this dries, it'll be clear, and we're going to see that really pretty orange sparkle coming through. All right, now it's time to die cut these with the coordinating dies. I am going to use very low tack tape to hold these dies in place as I run them through my die cut machine. And this, by the way, is a perfect representation of my fail. On the left is the sunflower that I accidentally used the lightest color to shade the leaves with. And on the right is the one that I actually used the correct color to shade the leaves. So I used the darkest ink color to shade the leaves, and that's what I ended up using to fix my mistake, which you'll see here as I bring the flowers back in. Okay, for the background of this card, I am using a slimline card base from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to use that AEGEAN ink to ink blend on the two corners, and I'm fading it out as I go further away from the corner. So I'm trying to get the highest concentration of ink in those corners. That's going to give a lot of drama behind the flowers and give some really good contrast. And then I fade that out into white. There's a middle section here that really has no ink on it, and that's because I really wanted it to fade out nicely. I'm going to bring in some Distress Mica Stain here. This is the Specimen color from Tim Holtz. It's a new color here for the fall and Halloween collection. And I'm going to splatter this across the entire background. And I know this feels like a lot of splatters, but we want a lot because our flowers are going to cover quite a bit of this. So I don't want there to be too little when I go to add the flowers later. So I also pulled in some shimmer mist from Brutus Monroe to add more of a lighter sparkle. It brightens up the background a little bit. And so here you can see as I bring in my flowers how that's going to cover quite a bit of the splattering and ink blending. And so we wanted to have quite a bit so that way we still have some beautiful splatter once we have all the flowers adhered. And to adhere them, I am using foam tape. This is Simon Says Stamp foam tape, and then I'm trimming off any excess of the flowers that's hanging off the sides. But don't throw those out because we're actually going to fill in this background with those leftover pieces. So this whole card we're going to cover with just 2 sunflowers, but by strategically cutting off and saving those other pieces, we're going to be able to fill this entire card with imagery, and it looks fantastic. So what this does is it really fills in the background. It gives this a very full and cohesive feel, and all by saving those little leftover pieces we were able to do that. So it's a really great trick for getting a lot of bang out of the pieces that you spent a ton of time creating. So here we go. Our floral background is ready. We just need a sentiment. So I thought it'd be fun to use this MERCI die from Simon Says Stamp. I'm going to cut it from some matte silver cardstock. It's such a pretty and simple sentiment, and I thought it would look really nice against these flowers. I did pop it up a little bit by putting another white piece behind that silver layer, and that's just going to give it a little bit of lift off of the shadow layer, which I actually die cut from some vellum. I didn't want a bright white background for this sentiment. I just wanted it to be soft and feel airy. So by using that vellum, it's going to give me a nice bit of separation from the sunflowers, but still keep things nice and light, and the focus stays on those flowers. I did pull out a sentiment strip from one of our Simon Says Stamp thank you collections, and I'm just going to glue that along the bottom underneath the word merci, and that's going to finish things off. I love the pop of sparkle that was added by using those stencils creatively, which gives this card a completely different feel than if you were just have used inks. So have fun with your different mediums and pastes. Get creative when you're working with layering stencils like this to color in your stamped images. You have the opportunity to throw in something completely unexpected. Lots of creative ways that you can use layering stencils, and I hope this idea was inspiring for you. Don't forget you can find all the supplies that I use linked below in the video description as well as on our blog, and I hope you will give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed.
Hi there, I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at SimonSaysStamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.